All right, so for lab two, and in week two, kind of what we're going to focus on this week is we're going to really just start kind of diving in. And I've always kind of said this about databases just a little bit, that there's not really a great entry point. It's not like you start at one end and you end on at the end, because I feel like with a lot of programming languages, you can start with something like hello world, and start there, and then you can just build on that until you have like this really advanced knowledge of it. With databases, it's kind of a little bit different because we're building permanent things, and the way we build things like requires all this stuff. So there's not like this great entry point into it, which I think I kind of hit on this a little bit last week. But I feel, and I'm glad you guys are actually the first ones that get to kind of use these new labs, this new curriculum, and we're going to start just with select statements, which is, I think, the best entry point there is. And we're kind of there will be some stuff you don't quite understand, but the nice thing about select statements is that they're a lot easy. They're very easy to grasp. Um, in fact, SQL was actually developed in a way that business people would be able just to write it, because it actually, they wanted it to sound like natural language. So we're going to do a lot of SQL statements this time, and I think that it'll be really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually kind of just try to explain things, like do just like a little lecture, not lab related. Just try to explain a little bit here and there just about general stuff like running a script, running a SQL statement, what is a SQL statement, that sort of thing. And then at the end, we'll actually look at the lab. I'll explain the lab a little bit. And it may sound a little confusing. If you've already checked it out, it may sound a little confusing. I really think after we just talk about the lecture a little bit, make sense. But then we're going to go over the lab just to make sure that everything's good. And it should be actually a pretty quick lab. I think it'll be really fun. I'm actually pretty excited because before we only had one lab that really just focused on select statements. Um, but this one, we're gonna get to do a lot more. So let's just dive in, and I'm gonna kind of just explain things. Not lab 2 related yet. We're gonna hold off on that until we kind of just get a little bit of a foundation built, because I know we talked a lot last week, so there may be a little redundancy. So be patient with me. It's just to make sure that everyone grasps the concepts. So what we're going to do to start out is we're just going to talk a little bit about, and we're just going to jump straight into a select statement. And we're going to just start talking about how we pull data out of our database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up our console. So I have our terminal here, and I'm going to open up a text editor to the side just so I can manipulate the text a little easier. As we talk about things. And just as a reminder, you can change your text editor to do SQL formatting. If you come down here and type SQL, and we're using Oracle, so I'm going to select Oracle. Honestly, as long as you selected just plain SQL, it would probably work fine as well, but this will probably catch just a few extra little menial things, but shouldn't be an issue either way. So, and then over here in our terminal, what we're going to do to get ready is we are going to first, let's go into our lab 2 directory, just so we're there. So we're going to go into data, CIT225, Oracle, and lab 2. Remember, we're going to use that CD command to change directory. You can go that way, or if you want to just get to lab 2 inside your file explorer, you can right click, go to actions, and say open a terminal here, and it'll pop a new window open, and we'll be in the same place. So whichever you prefer, there's 2 options. And again, we kind of covered that last week, but I just want to set you guys up so you guys are all ready. So this is kind of, if it were me doing the lab, this is kind of the setup I would have. But obviously we'll talk about it later, but I would have my lab 2 file up instead of just a plain one. But this is kind of where we're going to get started, because we're going to kind of explore some data as we go, because I kind of want to build a little bit of a foundation as we go along. So like I said, a select statement is how we pull data back out of our database. And in lab 1, we actually ran the scripts that kind of filled our database up. So let's log into our database. We're going to type in SQL Plus, which is our application that we're going to use. and then student, which is our username, and student, which is our password. So SQL plus student/student. We're going to hit return, and we should get this connected to, and it says the version of database we're connected to, and that means we're good. If we get this SQL prompt, then we're good. Now you're going to see me run some stuff in the command line, and then I'll write some stuff in the terminal. And basically, what you'll come to find is that there's just some things that the only thing I'm really going to write in the terminal are things that I'm going to be like changing frequently. But I'm going to explore our data in the terminal. So you'll see me kind of jump back and forth, and I'll try to explain what I'm doing along the way so it makes some sense. So the first thing that we want to do is I kind of want to see what we kind of have. Now, there was a command in lab 1, and so I'm actually going to open up lab 1 here real quick. We wrote a script in lab 1 that pulled all of our tables. So I'm going to go into lab 1, and I should have this lab 1 apply Oracle lab 1, but I think I made mine lab 1 demo.sql. So go into your lab 1, and if you remember right, there should be this query we had here. Now you could just open up your log, but I'm actually going to take and copy this, and I'm actually just going to put it right in my new file here. Now remember, this is not lab 2. This is just us kind of exploring. So I'm going to paste it there so we have it, but I'm also going to just paste it and run it inside here. And again, you can paste into here by going up to edit paste, or like it says, you can go Control-Shift-V. So I'll do Control-Shift-V, and we're going to just run that right in there. And so what this is this is our tables that we have access to. And it's just the user tables. So it skipped all the system tables, all the demo tables and stuff like that, because this is just what is going on with the course. And so here we can see our tables. Now, when you think of a table, think of an Excel spreadsheet, right? You have your columns and then rows with data in those rows organized by the columns. And that's exactly what these are. So I'm going to make this window a little bit bigger so when we actually pull some data out of here, we can see it. And I'm going to set my line size to 250. And what that does is it formats the output in Oracle so that it uses more or less of the terminal window. So if you have a large terminal window, you can set it to something like 250. So let's just take a look. I'm going to take a look at the member table. So I'm going to select everything from member. And this select statement is about as basic as it gets. I'm going to select everything. The asterisk means everything from member. So basically what I'm saying here is I want to see all the data from all the columns and from the member table. And then we can see some data. And like I said, we have our columns like account number, credit card type, created by creation date, last updated by last update date. So we have our columns, and then we have rows of data underneath. So, it's just like your table that you've always seen. There's just some things that just are a little different, which we will talk about in the future. But for now, just know that there's columns and we have rows of data that are organized by those columns. So we're going to kind of build this select statement. So you notice right there, what we had is we have select, which is obviously the main keyword there because we're selecting data. And then we choose what we want to select. And in this case, we want to select everything. And then we said from member, because we have to say where we're pulling our data from. So in this case, that's about as basic as a select statement can get. Now let's take a look at another table. Let's take a look at contacts. Let's select everything from contact. So now there's two kind of ways you can explore tables. There's this way, which shows you the data inside, which is nice. But sometimes maybe you want to just see, and I'm going to actually up this just a little bit. Let's up this to 275. Maybe you just want to see what columns you have. Now, we could look up here and see which columns we have. We have contact ID, member ID, but we don't know what data types those are. We don't know if that's a date, a string, a number, that sort of thing. Now, we can kind of infer from the data, but if there isn't any data, there'd be no way to know, or maybe we just want to be real specific. So the other really helpful command you can do is the describe command. So I'm going to type describe, and I'm going to describe contact. And what this does is it shows you all the columns and the type. So like it's a number data type. So we can only put numbers in there. This is a varchar2, which is a string. So this is a string, like, first name obviously would be a string, and it can hold up to 20 characters, right? So if you have someone who has a name that's 30 characters long, it's not going to work. We're going to have to truncate that, make it fit to 20, or make some design changes. And the reason we have this number on these strings is because that's how we save space. Because if we say, hey, first name can only be 20 characters long, well, now all of a sudden, we exactly know how much data we're going to use for that specific column, and versus otherwise, the system has to allocate the full allotment of the maximum size. So it's always good, and I think it's required in Oracle to specify the length of the varchar, so that you can conserve space on your disk, because obviously that's a big deal in a database. You can imagine when you have a million rows, if you're someone like Facebook, and someone like Facebook, or any of those big companies, storage is a massive concern, actually storage on disk. And so being able to conserve that space is a big deal. And so you want to really find where that fine line is, because you want to give everyone the opportunity to store important data, but you don't want to give any overhead, because then that's just a waste of space. So anyways, two ways to kind of look at it. We can do a basic select from the table, or we can describe. Now, the describe command has a shortcut. We can just type DESC, short for describe, contact, and it will do the same thing. So when you see me just type DESC contact, that's what I'm doing. And you'll see me do that frequently throughout the term. In fact, most of the time, even in my day job, when I'm getting ready to select from a table, I'll describe the table just so I can see all the columns that I'm looking at, which is what we're going to do now. So we're going to kind of build on our select statement a little bit, because remember, we're trying to pull out data. So, and I'm going to kind of pretend, throw some some hypotheticals out there, like as if we were working in a job. And we're going to use this contact table a lot here, because it has, I feel, the most usable data. We'll look at contact and item, because they have data that's easy to understand. So in this case, let's say that the boss came to you, right? And he wants to know everybody. He's like, I want a report of everybody's first and last name, right? Pretty simple. So let's write our select statement. So we're going to say select. Now, in the past, we did select everything from contact, and that gave us all the rows. Now, we could give this to our boss, and he'd be able to see the first and last name. But let's say that he's the type that, doesn't want to, this is just going to confuse him. We don't want to confuse him. And so we just want to show the first and last name. So what we can do is we can type select first name. And if you look here, it's first underscore name. So first underscore name, and then a comma. So we're going to separate the columns we want to show by commas. So we're going to select the first name and the last name from contact. And then we just get the first and last name. So fairly simple. Basically you just say which columns that you want to show and run it. All right, so now we're gonna kind of add just one more step to this. So let's say he says, oh, you know what, I only want to see the people whose last name is Sweeney. So we're gonna select, but the same thing. He's like, I want to see the first and last name of people whose last name is Sweeney. So we're gonna select first name and last name from contact. But we're going to add one more piece. So we're going to say where. And we're going to say where last name is equal to Sweeney. And then we only get the results where last name is equal to Sweeney. So, fairly easy up to this point. So now we're gonna add another thing. So you know, we got all the names for him. We got where last name Sweeney. And let's say we give him this report where, you know, all the Sweeneys, and he says, no, I want that ordered by first name because M, you know, I want it alphabetical. So we're going to run the same command, but we're going to add one more little piece, and we're going to say order by, and we're going to say first name. And there we go. So now we have the report that he wanted. So now let's do the same thing, but just let's say he wants everybody again. So select first name and last name from contact, right? So he wants that date again, but he wants this sorted, and he wants all the last names grouped together alphabetically, but then, you know, and then sorted by first name, right? So he wants to sort first by last name, second by first name. Well, you know, that's not too bad to do. So we're not gonna filter any data, right? Because that's what the where clause does. Our where clause filters the data that we show. So we're gonna keep all the data. So we're not gonna have a where clause, and instead we're just gonna go straight to the order by clause, and we're gonna order by last name first, and then first name. And now we are ordering first by last name. So you can see that Clinton comes first, then Gretzel, Moss, Royal, you know, down the line. And then within that, if we look at our Sweeneys, we have Ian, Matthew, and Megan in the correct order. Now, by default, Oracle sorts by ascending. It just assumes that you're sorting ascending. So let's say that we wanted to sort by last name descending. We want to start with W. All we have to do is add the descending keyword to that column, and now we have wins first. Now, if you notice, our first names are still ordered in ascending order. So if we wanted to run them both in descending, we would have to add descending to both columns in the order by clause. And then we get the stuff that we get what we want. Now, order will work with a lot of various things. So let's take a look at one more table here real quick. Let's take a look at the item table. So let's describe item, and you'll notice here we have a bunch of different stuff, but mainly the ones that we're interested in is item title and item release date. So let's just select everything from that table. Select everything from item. You know, and there's a lot of rows here, and maybe I just want to see like a sample size, right? Maybe I just want to see like the first 10. So let's do that. Let's select everything from item. So in Oracle, there's this built-in secret thing called row num. And maybe I'm thinking of another one. They all have them. Row num. Maybe it's just that one. There we go. No underscore. There's a secret column called row num where, you know, basically it's just the number of row in the table. And so that's what we did is I just said where row num is less than or equal to 10. And that's just so we get like a sample size. And you'll notice that we got 10 rows selected. That way we don't have to scroll to go up and try to find the columns. So if we look at this now, you'll notice that we have our item title, like Hunt for the Red October, Star Wars 1 through 3, The Chronicles of Narnia, Pirates of the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. And then we also have this item release date, right? And that's the date that the movie came out. So let's say of the movies in our database, we want to know what the movie name is, and we want it ordered by the day it was released. And we want to also show the release date. So let's write that one real quick. So we're going to select item title. You know, and really it's pretty easy because you just think about what do you want to show. And I want to show item title and the item release date. And where am I getting that data from? Well, I'm getting it from item. And then we talked about that we wanted to order it. So let's order it by item release date. And remember, that's going to sort ascending by default. So let's do that. So if you look right here, our year is going up and it sorts the dates magically by itself. So we don't have to worry about months and all that. It'll just take care of it for us. Because actually in Oracle, the dates are actually represented in the back end by a number. So every day essentially is a number. So you can actually show it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but just know that it sorts it for you. So the oldest movie in our database is The Hunt for the Red October, which came out on the 2nd of March, 1990, followed by Hook, which came out a little less than a year later. And then our most recent movie is the Da Vinci Code, which came out 19th of May, 06. And wow, Cars came out in 06. That makes me feel really old because I feel like that was a fairly new movie, but apparently it's not. So anyways, yeah, that's how we would do that. Now, now feel free to, I'm gonna write a query. I'm gonna ask some questions. You know, there is a right and a wrong answer, but it's okay to get the wrong answer because you guys are all new at this. So I want you to just kind of guess. So I'm going to really quick write a query here. So I'm going to select the item title, just kind of like we did before, but I'm not going to select the release date. And then I'm going to select from item, and I'm going to keep that order by item release date. So I don't have item release date in the select list. Is this going to work or is it going to throw an error? If you think it's going to work, it should work. Okay, there's one for should work. Any naysayers? Any think it's not going to work? Okay, there's a naysayer. And you know, this is probably, I remember way back when I was first kind of learning this. This was a concept that took me a minute before I had that aha moment. Right. So I'm going to run this. It does work, FYI. And the reason being is because just because we don't have it in the select statement, it's still there in the background. So the select, the part of the select statement is kind of the part that says, oh, what am I going to show? But all of it's still there in the background, if that makes any sense. So as I'm doing things, I always like to think that, like, okay, if whatever's in this from clause is all there, it's all accessible to me, it's just not going to show it unless I put it in the select list. So yeah, no problem if you didn't think it was going to work, because for the longest time, I also didn't think that. And this will actually get to be a big concept in week 5. So that's kind of why I'm just trying to reinforce that a little bit, because it is going to be a big deal come week 5. So all the data is there. So just like when we, basically it's like running this, we're selecting everything from item, order by item release date. But basically, because our select statement is there, we're only showing the one column. But we can still use all the other stuff. It's still all there. We can order by it. We can do this and that. We can do all that. We just can't see it unless we put it in our select list. Okay, so let's look at one more before we get too crazy. And I'm gonna real quick just make sure I'm looking here. Let's we're gonna talk about one function.
Welcome to the Alexa Prize.
Oh, apparently Alexa thought I said her name. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. Anyways, we're gonna learn about one function. So let's take a look at contact again. Let's describe contact. And you'll notice that here we have first, middle, and last name. So let's select everything from contact. And you'll notice that some of these middle names are empty, right? And just so you know, in Oracle, an empty is often referred to as a null. You know, and programming languages, nil, you've probably heard nil before, or null. They're synonymous. And so when we say null, we mean empty. And up here, you'll notice it says not null up there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Basically, have you guys ever filled out like you go to like get something, or you're filling out a web form, and it's asking for your email, and you're like, hey, I just like want to download the free ebook. I don't really want to give you my email, but it says, oh, this field's required, and it gives you that little red circle and makes you. That's essentially what we're doing with our database. And it's so we can keep our data integrity up, because we want to make sure that if we, if we made it so people could leave first and last name blank, what's the point of having a contact row? You know what I mean? So that's why that not null is there. And it makes it so you have to put data in there. And the reason I'm getting here is because this middle name. So let's say your boss comes to you and, we gave him first and last name all separated, different columns. But let's say he says, no, I want it to be last comma first, all in one string, one column. So let's do that. So I'm actually going to do it over here real quick. Let's type it up over here. So we're going to say select. And this is kind of the way that I like to format my SQL queries. I put select up there, and then I do a double space to make them align right, and then I'll put my first column. So we did this the first time. So we selected first name, comma, last name from contact. So I'm going to copy this. That's what we did last time, but he wants that first and last name combined, and he wants it to be last comma first. So what we're going to do is we're going to just rewrite this query just a little bit. We're going to say select, and we are going to select the last name, right? That's what he wanted, the last name. Then he wanted a comma. So we're going to do this little pipe thing, and then in quotes, specify a raw string, which means that we hand typed it, and then first name. And those pipes, what that does is it concatenates from contact. And concatenate means that it's just going to tie those two strings together. Copy that and paste. And now you'll notice that we get our last comma first. And you'll notice that now it calls our column like, the actual thing. And that's because it's not just one column anymore. It's got its own thing. And so let's give it a column name for the report. So we're going to say as full underscore name. Or let's call it last first. Sorry. Last first is what we're going to call that. And there we go. And so now our column name is last first. So we can use that as keyword. And that's basically saying, hey, look, I'm selecting this data as, I'm going to give it a nickname as a different name. So nice and easy to kind of rename some things, which is really important when you're pulling data out into like other systems, or maybe like in this case, you want to make it easier for users to see what it is. And let's say your boss is going to get super confused by that underscore, because like let's say we're just going to export this to a CSV file or something, or Excel format. We can say last first. And if we put it in quotes, then we can have that space in there. And just so you know, a single quote is what Oracle kind of expects as a raw string. And so I use, anytime it's like kind of a raw string as far as data goes, I use single quotes. But when it's something like an as statement, the as wants to have double quotes. And there you can see that we have a space between. Now that's, yep,
Sorry.
go ahead.
What are those vertical lines next to last name in the select statement?
Those are called pipes, and basically those are shortcuts to concatenate strings.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and we could actually write that with the actual functions. And I believe in Oracle, it's actually just concatenate. We'll try it. Last name. And I'll show you why I did that. Why the pipes make it a lot easier. And this is kind of one of the places where the difference between databases gets a little weird. Let me hurry and let's take a look at what that one's called. So we're going to look up that function.
If we have issues with syntax, do you recommend W3 schools or similar?
Yeah, W3 School's great. My actual favorite is actually just going straight to the source. So my favorite actually is I usually just go straight to the Oracle SQL database reference. And usually if you Google it, it's clear up there at the top. And the reason I like it is because they give you this nice little diagram and explain it in a nice, easy way. Now it looks like a little bit more confusing, but if you look at it and then scroll down to the examples, it makes it nice and easy. That's my favorite because it's straight to the source. So that function is concat. I know like 4 different database systems, so I often get confused. Anyways, but concat here. Now the problem is that in Oracle, the concat function only can take 2 parameters, meaning that we can only concatenate 2 strings at a time. So let's say that I try to add middle name on here. So if I say last, first, and middle, I'm going to copy this, and when we paste it, we'll get an error because it says invalid number of arguments. Now in Microsoft SQL Server and some of the others, their concat function will take, I mean, I'm sure it's limited, but you can add just dynamically a different number of parameters, which is really nice. Like in Microsoft SQL Server, I just run the concat function, but because of the way Oracle's built, the way you have to do it is really convoluted if you don't use the pipes. So if we wanted to take our example here with the comma, we would take the last name, concatenated it with a concatenation of a comma and first name. So what happens is you end up with this massive embedded concatenation list that gets really convoluted really quickly. I mean, you can kind of see that, you know, which one looks simpler. And if we really want to do an accurate explanation, we can go here like this. So you can see all the additional keystrokes it takes to achieve the same goal. So that's why I use the pipes, and thank goodness it's there because it just makes it a lot easier. So, you know, you'll rarely see concat in Oracle unless it's something just super simple and like it's just 2, you might see a concat. But for the most part, people usually use the pipes. So good question. And the pipe key, in case you're wondering, is just above the enter key on your keyboard. You just have to hit shift and it's the / key. So real quick, what we're going to do, we digress there for a little bit. We're going to get back to why we were talking about null values, those empty values for middle name. So let's do this. Let's select the full name. So let's get first, middle, and last. So let's get the first name. We're going to pipe that with a space, and then we're going to get a middle name, pipe that with a space, and then we're going to get the last name from contact. Now you'll notice that because we have that, some of these don't have a middle name, you'll notice that we have this 2-space gap, right? So we end up with this two-space gap. So basically what we can do is we can use this fancy little function. And let's say we just want to show that they don't have a middle name. For right now, we can put this null value function, which is NVL, which stands for null value. And basically what it's going to do, and we can even pull up the reference here. Let's just take a look here. Let's pull up this null value function here. So here's our null value. And basically what it does is it takes two parameters, right? And it lets us replace a null, returned as blank, when a string in the result, with a string in the results of a query. So if expression 1 is null, then null value returns expression 2. If expression 1 is not null, then it returns expression 1. So essentially what we're doing here is we're going to put middle name here, and if middle name is null, then we're going to tell it to return no middle name, right? Which is pretty bland and generic, but it'll work. Otherwise, so if they actually have a middle name, it's still going to return their middle name. So let's give this a shot. So now we can see the people with no middle name and that sort of thing. So let's say we wanted to fix this to make it so if they have a middle name, it returns that space. And if they don't, it's not going to affect it. We could do something like this, because they're going to have a space between their first and last regardless. So let's pipe the space in there. And then we're going to add a null value. We're going to say middle name. So if middle name is null, then we are going to not return, or let's see, I confused myself. We're evaluating middle name. Yeah, so if they have a middle name, it will return the middle name. Otherwise, we want to return, and maybe this won't work the way I thought. First name. Okay, I got to think for a minute. I confused myself. I had it. We concatenate a space, and maybe we just need to not concatenate the space. Yeah, maybe that's not going to work. Maybe that's not the solution to that one. But anyways, the null value function is going to replace that. And we could solve that with some other things. And maybe there is a solution with the null value function.
Can you possibly do a backspace character?
Yeah, you can do a backspace character.
What about just a blank space, like a blank, like null?
Oh yeah, you could. Yeah, we could do that. We could just return null. Let's try that. Then, well, let's play around with this. Okay, so this is going to return the first name, a space, and then it'll return the middle name if it's not null. Otherwise, it's going to return null, and the last name, which I believe will still have. It'll either cut it short or yeah. So if they have a middle name, it'll still. So I don't know if this is really going to solve it, because really we need to evaluate middle name, and then if they don't have a middle, if they do have a middle name, we want to add the space. If they don't, which we'll actually get to that kind of logic in the future, but I don't think we can solve it with the null value. But anyways, so I just kind of wanted to show a little bit how those null values work, because a lot of times, you know, you might want to use that null value to get better output, or to show that there is no output, so it's not confusing, such as, you know, how we put no middle name up here, or you could just replace that with null, as far as like actual null characters, which in some cases, I believe in the lab, there'll be column formatting at the beginning, which will do that for you. Because in Oracle, you can actually designate a null to show up with a given character, and I believe that's one of them. So that way you can see that the middle name is null. All right, so let's take a look at the lab real quick. Or I guess real quick, does anyone have any questions about select statements in general? Okay, doesn't sound like there's too many. So real quick, kind of one thing that I want to show you real quick, I guess, before we move on to the lab, is on McLaughlin's website. There is a great resource on select lists where it kind of goes through all the different pieces of a select list. And some of those we haven't gotten to yet. So like we haven't gotten to the group by clause, which we're not going to worry about, or the having clause. So these are two that you just don't need to worry about right now. But all these others are really great. But the most important part of this is right down here on this page. And you can get to this just if you go to michaelmclaughlin.info/db1. And it's right here under articles, the select statement. And this piece right down here is just fantastic because it talks about the order of execution, which is a big deal in how this works. So a query with a select, from, and where clause, or a query with a select, from, where, and order by clause. So if we were looking at how our little select statement here was executed, in fact, let's real quick build one. Let's select everything from, or let's select first name, and last name from contact, where last name is equal to Sweeney, order by last name, first name. All right, so there's our little example here. So if we look at this, we can kind of know how this is gonna, in what order this is gonna happen, because we have all three of them. So first things is the from clause finds the table, right? So step one is the from clause. And so when we execute this, the computer is going to go to the from clause, and it's going to say, okay, I'm looking at the contact table, which is pretty logical, given, if you were to think about how you would go about doing this, if you were like a librarian looking for a book, right? So we're going to go to the contact table. And then the next thing is we want to filter our data. So then we say, okay, I'm only looking for the rows where last name is equal to Sweeney. So we filter it out. So then we take our little folder of records that we want, so where last name's equal to Sweeney, and now we're going to order those. We're going to order those by last name, first name, which is why, when we did that one example about how it worked, even if it wasn't in the select list, because at this point, it's still all there. And then the last piece is that it just returns the last little bit. So if we had our little folder, let's use the analogy that we're digging through archives of student transcripts, okay? So we're looking for all the student transcripts. So we go to the transcript drawer. We pull out where last name's equal to Sweeney. We order those alphabetically because let's just say that was part of what we're doing. And then let's say we only wanted the most, or we only wanted the final transcript, or whatever documents in there, we only wanted that one thing. Well, in this case, we're only showing specific columns, but that's the order that it executes. It goes to the from, to the where, order by, and then the select, which is a little weird because I think a lot of times we want to read this like we do a book, where select and then to the from, then where, and order by. But really, logically, we should start with, contact, then where, then order by, then the select list. But, I didn't write it, but that's the way it executes, which, helps a little bit if you're trying to troubleshoot, and it will become a bigger deal later on. But I wanted to show you that website because it is really nice when you come to that. All right, one more thing, though, that I wanted to show you, because I realized that we showed a where clause, but what if we want to say, oh, we want all the Sweeneys but we want the Sweeneys where middle name is null. Let's say we're trying to fill in some missing data. So we're going to have two. So do we put another where? Well, that would actually throw an error. You can only have one where clause, but what comes after where is you can filter by multiple things by saying and. So we say where last name is equal to Sweeney and middle name is null. Now, is null is one of those things that it's going to be a little different because it really can't be string evaluated. So you just put is null. And there we get only the Sweeneys where they don't have a middle name. So if you have multiple, you can do that. Now let's say we want to do an or statement. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. I always like to tie logic statements on the same line. So that way I don't get confused. So we're going to say where last name is equal to Sweeney or last name is equal to, let's say, Clinton. So now we have the Sweeneys and the Clintons because we have that or, because it either is Sweeney or. Now we can kind of change this up a bit. Let's say that last name's equal to Sweeney or first name is equal to Simon. So now we're going to get all the Sweeneys and anyone whose first name is Simon, regardless of their last name. So basically, it's just like basic logic. If it evaluates as true, it gets the rows. So where last name is equal to Sweeney, okay, or first name is equal to Simon. So, and like I said, I always try to like make this easier on myself. And so I surround logic statements in parentheses. You don't have to necessarily, but you can order it just like you would a math problem by putting parentheses in there. So in this case, we get the same results, right? Where last name is equal to Sweeney or first name is equal to Simon. And that's as a single statement, you know, that's a single logic piece. And then from here we could add and last name, let's add the Clintons again, and last name is equal to Clinton. So now we should get, you know, all the Simons, or we actually will get no rows selected because we put this and statement, because there are no Clintons who have Sweeney as a last name or Simon as a first name. But if we change this to Gertels, then we would get, and I apparently didn't copy all of it. Let's try again. We only get Simon because, you know, we filtered out all of the rest of our data, right? Because we had this and last name is equal to Gretz, because this is the last piece and is absolute, you know, it has to be true. So we only get the last name of equal to Gertels. So that means that this is kind of a moot point. However, we could have this or. And then we would get, and I guess we need to change this to Clinton again because it would still get the same data. So now it's going to evaluate the top one or the bottom one. So now we get kind of all of them. So you can kind of see how you would tie all these different things together.
Quick question,
Yep.
if I may. So does the in statement work?
Yes. So yeah, and I was just about to get to that because there are a couple other things you can do that to make your life easier. So like in this case, we have last names equal to Sweeney or last names equal to Clinton, you know, and that would get a little tedious tying all that together. So we can say where last name in, and basically now we can type a list. So let's say we want the Clinton family, we want the Sweeney family, and let's say we want the Smith family. And so basically is if last name is in that list, it'll pull them. So the in clause does work, and it's really handy because then you can just kind of put a list there. And like I said, you can use a lot of these together. So let's say we want to say where last name is equal to is in that list, or middle name is null, right? So either they're in the list or the middle name's null. And now we get they're either in the list or their middle name's null. So you can see how you can kind of tie all those together based on your stuff there. So now, but if we change this to an and, we're going to get them in the list and if their middle name's null. So we're only going to see people with Clinton, Sweeney, and Smith, and their middle name is null, which we actually only have 2, which is a little surprising. So you can kind of see how you can use that to kind of filter out your data to find what you're looking for.
Question.
Yep.
You've used and or. Can you use not?
Yes, you can use not as well. So, and basically what that does is it just pulls the opposite. So like, let's use our our example here with the in clause. So we're going to say where not last name in the list. And basically it just pulls the exact opposite of that list. So now we have everybody whose name is not Clinton, Sweeney, and Smith. And you can add that to any like where clause, you know, so we could say where last name in, or, and then we could also say and not middle name is null. And there's a couple different ways you could write that, but you know, so there's all the people who actually have a middle name, and we could actually, let's add the middle name here so we can see our data and make sure that we're right. And there we go. So we can see that they all have middle names. The other way to write this specifically with this is null thing is we can say and middle name is not null. And that would be the same thing, but not is used to kind of antiquate the whole thing there. So yep, good questions. Good questions. Any other questions? And there's a lot more that we kind of haven't gone over. And that's because honestly, we've gone quite a bit above what you're going to actually need this week for the lab, but I hope that it kind of helps build it out just a little bit. Like I said, I think select lists are kind of the easiest starting point into it because you don't realize it, but we're learning about table structures as we go. And then the select list, which is the select statement, is kind of the foundation of database queries because it's probably the one that's most used. In fact, you know, in this class, we're going to learn a lot about developing and designing databases. But, you know, the frank reality is that in many cases, you build the database once and hopefully you don't have to touch it for years. And then from there on, you just write select statements. Or, you know, we'll talk about data manipulation a little bit too, or, you know, let's change everyone's last name or whatever. We'll talk about that. But select lists are kind of the bread and butter of all this. Someone asked, why is Brian Smith his own table? It's just a formatting thing, and I think that was up here more because I have the output line set to something by default. You guys are all the same. So basically, it only puts so many rows before it shows the column names again. And actually, I think we can clear that if we say clear columns. We could rerun. So let's select everything from contact, and let's see if it. So yeah, so it just puts them on his own row just because we have a limit on how many rows that it thinks it can show before it has to re-put the new columns. So he's in the same table. It just is a formatting thing. Yep. Okay. And I think I got all the questions. Sorry, I was going crazy and I forgot to look at the chat. Perfect. All right. So let's talk a little bit about lab 2. So, in this lab, it says it's, you're going to reinforce how you run scripts from command line, which is what we did in lab 1. So I'm actually going to, let's save this, and let's save it in our data 225 Oracle lab 2. And we're going to just call it demo.sql. All right, so now that's demo.sql, and I can make sure that's in there. Let's run a bang ls, which is !ls. It's called a bang, and we can see that demo.sql. And so to run that script, we're going to say @ symbol, and then we're just going to put the file name, demo.sql. We have to be in the same directory or provide the full path. So we could run @demo.sql, or we could say @home student data CIT225 Oracle lab 2 demo.sql, and hopefully there's no typo. Same result. One is using the relative path, which is relative to where you're currently at, and the other is called the absolute path, which means that it will work no matter where you are. So that's kind of how that does. That's why I always say just open it up when in your lab directory, so that way you don't really have to worry about the absolute path, because obviously you can see it's a lot of typing, and then you can just run the files that are in that directory. But that's how we run our script.
Can you go over the bang thing again, please?
Yep. So right now you'll notice we're in this SQL prompt. So let's say that I want to list the files in my current directory. Well, if I try to type a Linux command like ls, it says that command is unknown because we're logged into Oracle. But what we can do is they gave us this way to kind of escape the SQL prompt. So we can type ! and then type a Linux command, and it will execute it with some caveats. So if I do command pwd, you'll see that we're in lab 2. Well, let's say that I want to try to move back into the Oracle lab. Well, I execute it, no errors, but if I look and see where I'm at, I'm still in lab 2. So basically, bang works really nice. I use it mostly just to see where I'm at and what's in there. So like ls will show you what files you have access to, and then pwd will show you your current path. So if you just want to type, and like I said, I usually just do it just to type because I forget what I save things as. So the most frequent thing that I use it for is I just type bang ls, so I can see what files are available to me in my current directory. That help?
Yes, thank you.
Yep, perfect. All right, reinforce how to set Oracle environment variables. So I believe we talked about this last time. I actually don't think we're really going to cover it all that much here. Oh, no, we do. So these session level variables are, and like we said, our server, our line size was one of those. So that little issue we were seeing with the multiple people, or with Brian being on his own line, I think this will fix that. So let's say we're going to set the page size to 999, and then let's select everything from contact. And now we don't get him on his own line. And like I said, that's just like a formatting thing. So it's not like a huge deal. It just makes it a little bit easier to see. So basically it's going to have you set some of these session variables, which you'll probably have to set each time if you shut off your computer, just FYI. But it's not a big deal either way. And the spool command. So I know there was some confusion about this from lab 1, which I was expecting. You guys are all new. But you guys can kind of specify your own log file. So, if I wanted to, let's open up lab 2 actually here real quick. So by default, your lab 2 should look like this. And it's going to run apply Oracle lab 1 for you by default. And in fact, it actually sets all this for you by default. So It sets those variables that's in the instructions. It calls lab1 for you, and then this opens the log file. So whatever we put after the spool command is what your file name will be. So I could actually just save this. Let's actually just run apply Oracle Lab 2. You know, we don't have any code in there yet, but we can run it, and it's going to run Lab 1. So it looks like it's doing a lot, but that's all from Lab 1. Because like I said, it's going to start over every time. So it actually deleted everything just now and rebuilt it. And so now if I go into my 225 Lab 2 folder, you'll notice that there's a bunch of files here that were not there before. You know, I can do a bang ls here now, and it's a lot more than what there was prior. But the one that we're looking for is, if we look here, apply Oracle Lab 2.txt. Apply Oracle Lab 2.txt. If we open this, we have exactly what's between where we say spool and spool off. So whatever we put between the two spool commands is what's going to show up in this file. So you can kind of name your file whatever you want. So let's I kind of don't like the apply Oracle Lab 2 because I don't like to type that much. So Lab 2, and now if I rerun this and then open up my little folder here, now I'll have this lab2.txt. You know, and you could make a bunch of these, because you'll notice that I actually still have the original, but it's not going to get updated anymore. If I have lab2.txt open and rerun this, nothing changed. Let's hurry and let's say select everything from contact. Let's save it. So we're going to put something in there, and we're going to rerun this. And I have this file open. You'll notice that it said that it was modified by another program. So let's reload it. And now you'll notice that my results are in there. So you can kind of name your files whatever you want, as long as you have the right one when you go to submit. So you can leave it default. The one nice thing about leaving it default is that they stay right next to each other. So I'm going to change it back to this, because one nice thing, like I said, is that they stay next to each other. So when you go to submit, you can find your two files, and they're actually just right next to each other. So it makes it a little bit easier that way to find them. But anyways, the spool command just makes a log file between them. How to query the data dictionary, which we talked about. That was from Lab 1, and that's what we pasted at the very beginning. Remember how we were saying, oh, we want to find all the tables that are available to us, and that query was in your Lab 1, just like I went and found. So if you need to, if it comes up, I don't think it will, but if you never need to see what kind of tables you have access to, you can run that query and it'll show you. All right, and then how to write single table queries with and without a where clause, which we did plenty of. And then how to filter based on wildcards and null values, use piped concatenation, lookup operators like in, any, some operator, stuff like that, and use the between operator for range comparisons. So there's a couple that we didn't do. So like equals any, equals some, and like between. So let's take a look at some wildcard stuff here real quick. So let's say we want everybody whose first name starts with an M. Select everything from contact where first name is like and our wild card. And I think when it says wild cards, it may be talking about this, but this is also a wild card, the %sign. So we'll put that in there. And so like if you wanted to find everybody whose first name started with an M, you could say like M wildcard. So it has to be an M. Let's say we wanted to see everybody whose first name starts with an M-E. We could say like M-E %sign. And there's our wildcard to get anything. So basically it has to be either ME, but then anything afterwards. So there's a few things there and stuff like that, and a lot of stuff you can look up. The between operator. The between operator is great to find things that are in a range. They have to be kind of in a range. So let's take a look at our item table. So let's say we want to select everything from item where, and I'm going to add another little function to this one. We're going to select everything from item where the year of item release date is between, let's say 2000 and 2006. And maybe I'm thinking again of SQL Server. Year invalid identifier. Well, I thought that would work.
Hey guys.
I got a question for you. So
Yeah.
whenever you're searching in something with and using single quotes, or you're using like the wildcard, is that case sensitive?
Yes. Yep, it is case sensitive. To get into the whole not case sensitive thing, you have to do regular expressions, which we're not going to cover right now because they can get really complicated.
Thank you.
Oh, yep, no problem. Oh, and that's right. Oracle uses this extract thing where extract year from let's give this a shot. There we go. And so you can use the between operator. So like in this case, I got the year from item release date and said, you know, we want it where it's between 2000 and 2006, which we, where's the item release date? Right there. So yep, we get all the, you know, 02 all the way up. You could do this with just the basic year. So we could say where, you know, item release date, like let's say we wanted to find all the ones in 2006, or, you know, a specific, or let's do it a little bit more. Let's say we want to say where item release date is between the 16th of May 02 and the, let's say the 31st of December 2005. Oh, and I need to put this in the correct format there. And there we go. So you can use the between operator to kind of pull some data there as well. And let me look at the instructions here. What were some of the other ones? It was Oracle. We have the in, which we talked about in. Any and some operator are other ones that we have. So let's take a look at those. So let's see here. I'm trying to think of a good example. I thought I had some written up here. And let me see if there's actually this, because I prefer not to talk about this till next week. The any and some operators. Let me see if these are here somewhere. So step one, you know, while we're doing that,
step 10 says to potentially use one of those. The
okay.
last one.
Step 10. Using ERD. Arrange.
Or
So
it
that,
was 9 or 10. I can't remember. It was one of
okay,
the
yeah,
last ones.
let me check here.
All right, it was 9.
Using the following. Yeah, this will be good. We can talk about this one. Write a query that returns the city, state, province, and postal code column values from the address table where the city column value is found in a set of Provo and San Jose. Okay, so that one will actually end up being the in operator. So we're going to hold off on talking about the any and some just right now. If you guys want to look it up, feel free. You won't need it for this lab, I do not believe. Let's kind of go through these steps here real quick so I can kind of explain them just a little bit. Because basically what you're going to be doing is you can just pretty much skip straight to step 1. Is you're going to look at these ERD diagrams, which they kind of have in there, but if you want, you can just run the describe, and select everything like we were doing here in the video. So using the following ERD, which is this diagram, write a query, a select statement that returns the account number and credit card number from the member table. So pretty easy, right? I don't think we need to go over that one too much. And step 2 is going to be the same thing. Just select first name, middle name, last name from contact. That one almost, that one's all super, super easy. And it's nice because they give you the following output to make sure it works.
I came in a little bit late, but it says use the following SQL plus command to format the output data. How are we to use that? It says
So you would put that just in front of the query. So like, for example, if I was going to, where's that first one? And honestly, when I grade, I'm not going to care about the formatting all that much. So you can use it, but basically all it's going to do is it's going to make it pretty, essentially. So it changes the heading. It changes the size of the columns, formatted as a alphabetic or as character string. So, it's not too crazy. In fact, I'm just going to plug it right here on the top of this one. And it looks like it didn't format quite right. And it looks like copying out of that document isn't really the best. So if you want to, you can kind of, you can leave it off if you want, to be honest, because it would be a pain. And
so is that similar to like when you do the select statement, do select account number as, and then you would
yeah,
number? That's about
yep.
pretty much the same thing.
Almost the same thing. This gives you a little bit more control because in that one we're kind of just changing like the heading, which is what the heading piece does. This will actually let you like format the output size and stuff. But honestly, I have not used that hardly at all, ever. So you can leave it off if you want, because it is kind of a pain. If they had it easier to copy and paste, I'd say go for it. But where you're going to have to format it or retype it, all I really care about is the query. So if you want it, great. If you don't need it. But you can see all it really does is reformat that. And then the other problem that a big reason why I don't ever really like to use it is because now if I select first name from contact, it actually keeps that formatting until I quit the session or until I say clear columns. So now that if I clear the columns and then rerun it, then it's back to normal. So you can choose if you want to do that or not. It is a lot of work, and I am not going to dock you any points if you don't have the formatting.
When you first started doing this, you used to set the line size. Is there a one line size that would work best for all of these queries?
It really all it depends on is the size of your terminal screen. And so when we set the line size, really all it's doing, because like let's say I set the line size to 90, right? And then I select everything from contact. It's going to be really short. But so it just depends on the size of your screen. So like I made mine big just because my terminal screen is wide enough that you can see it all. So it's not really necessarily so much about the query as much as it is about your terminal screen.
That was extremely helpful. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Yeah, and it's just one of those things that if you want to look at it, and like what I would do, depending on the size of what screen you're working on, is just play around with it. Make the screen big enough to be comfortable, your terminal screen, and then just play with the line size until you get it where you want for most cases. So I set mine a lot of times to like 250. It's kind of like my generic. I have a 27-inch monitor, so I usually set mine to like 250, and that seems to be a pretty nice number for me on a wide screen. So good question.
Is that something we can set in our environment variables?
Yes. And yeah, once you set your line size, it will stay that way until you quit the session.
Okay.
Similar to those things.
I don't know how much time you have left or whatever, but could we do one of the steps in the lab as just practice to go
Yeah,
over one of them?
do you have one that you'd like to see?
I mean, 10, since it probably is the hardest, doesn't matter to me, or we could just do one since it's the easiest, either one.
Okay, well, we've done a lot for one. So yeah, give me a minute. Let me work through them all, and then we'll take a look at 10.
All right.
All right, so step 2, especially these ones that are just, select, here's a list of columns. So in fact, I can show you this one because we just did it. So like step 2, I'm just going to take out the where clause, and there's not even order by. So, and I say this a lot, the instructions often sound a lot more complicated than what they are, which is most like a lot of the case. So step 2, actually, we did as an example already. It's right there. It's nice and easy. So, select, basically when it says return, we're talking about the list and select. So it returns first name, middle name, and last name values from the contact table. So nice and easy. So 1 and 2 are exactly that way.
Can I clarify something really quick?
Yep.
So when we're doing this assignment, we're basically writing 10 different select statements in the enter code here.
Exactly.
Ending each statement with a semicolon, and that's it.
Yep. And so what I would do is, in fact, let's just do this real quick. I'm going to open up lab 2 real quick, and let's, I would just put a little comment. Oh, and to do a comment, it's just 2 dashes, or you can do multi-line with a /*. I could say, multi-line comment. I usually just do a single line. So what I would do if it were me, I would say like step 1, and then put your step 1 there. Then I would say like step 2, we could actually just paste that right in there because we actually have it. So let's just take and paste that. And there's step 2, and onward to step 3. And if we look at step 3, it's going to be almost the same thing. It's just from a different table, right? So you're going to select city, state, province, postal code from address. So same exact format. You're just going to change this word, this word, this word, and this word. So I don't want to give too many away. There's step 3. Step 4 is actually the same thing, just with 2. And then step 5 is another one of the same thing. I imagine most of you will be through this lab pretty quickly. Step 6 is the first one where we're going to add a where clause. So let's kind of take a look at step 6. So it wants you to select the item title, item rating, and release date from the item table where the item rating equals PG. And we did one extremely similar to this just not that long ago. Let's see if I can grab my screen here. There we go. So let's take a look over here. And maybe that's just one we did in the terminal. But we can say, you would select whatever from item, but we would just add where item And again, this is where I would, let's just describe item so I know what column it is. And it is item underscore rating, where item underscore rating is equal to, and it's at an uppercase PG. So the only difference here is you would put the column's name in there for the actual thing. So from there, it wants the item title, item rating, and release date. So you would just, add. And for closure, I'm going to use a different column than what it wants, but this is just for demo purposes. And so I'm going to leave off the last one, which is item release date. I'm just going to pull 2. So that way I don't give away the solution in its entirety. But, there we go. There we have our item title and item rating. And you can see why they would format it, because if you wanted this to actually show item rating in its entirety, you could, or you could just say as rating. If you want to go above and beyond, you could do something like that. So there is step 6 with our first where clause.
Do you care if they're written out line by line like that, or if it's just one line? I mean, I'm guessing this makes it easier for readability.
Oh, you mean like as far as how you format these?
Breaking it out like this select statement. That one is over 5 lines. Okay.
No, you go ahead and do whatever you want.
Practice?
This right here, so this right here is kind of like the standard per se. Like if you were to go to the people who invented SQL and say like, how do you do this? This is kind of how they say to do it. And it's honestly how I write all mine. Partly because, I took the same class when I was in college, and, McLaughlin always wrote it this way. So I started writing it that way. And he actually does his a little different, we'll find in the future, than even from what I do it. But I really like it this way because when you get to have big, giant queries, it really makes editing them way, way easier. So right now, it doesn't matter. And I actually will never grade down because of formatting, because I feel like that's kind of like the fun part about programming, is you kind of get to do what you want. But it does help readability, and I'll be interested to see, if you choose to do something different, how it goes, because it does get much easier. And not to digress too much, but I'll show you a real quick example of why, when you get to a certain point, you really choose to format correctly. So here's a bigger query, I guess you could say. And you can see that formatting obviously becomes a big deal here because there's just a lot going on. And if you need to change one little thing, it makes it a lot easier to find, because this doesn't have any, making it multi-line doesn't really have any difference on performance or anything like that. It's not like more lines of code is a bad thing. It's more just about, there are more elegant solutions, but in this case, as far as formatting goes, it doesn't matter how many lines it is. It doesn't affect performance at all. It's just simply for readability. So you can see how something like this, it just makes it a lot easier just to kind of see what's going on in some of those big queries. All right, so there is step 6. Oh, and they also have an order by, so let's add that. We don't want to miss that. So where, and then we're going to order by the item in ascending order. So item title. Now remember, we know that it sorts ascending by default, so we can leave that off if we so desire. But let's say that we want to just be sure, we can put ascending. And the outcome is the same. So I'm going to leave it off just because for readability. But, so what I would do is I would actually write the queries, and you can open up a little document just like this and write those queries, copy, paste them, and run them. And then you can actually, once you get them tested and know that they're pulling the right thing, then you can take and plop them in your Apply Oracle Lab 2. Which, like I just did. So there's a step 6. And we did step 7 pretty much almost exactly with the same last name and everything. I don't know what are the odds. But you'll notice that it says a middle name is Null, which we did some of that too. Like I said, I don't want to give too much away. Okay, step 8. So here's one that has a wildcard. So this one wants you to write a query that returns the first, middle, and last name from the contact table where the last name starts with a case insensitive viz string. And you need to promote the column value to, okay, so let's talk a little bit about this one. So it says you need to promote the column value and string literal value to uppercase or demote them to lowercase and find the matching string. So if we don't care about string sensitivity, case sense, what we can do is we can just make them all uppercase. And that's pretty easy. And that's probably what I would say is the best solution. I'm an uppercase person. So let's, this is our step 8. So we're going to select last name or first name, and I'm going to leave off, let's just do it. First name, middle name, and last name from contact. There's kind of our base. And the nice thing about SQL is if you really want to, you can build your base. If you want to take this step by step, you can kind of just build your base, make sure that works. And now we're going to add our where clause. And now what we want to do is we want it where last name starts with a case insensitive VIS. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say uppercase, and I think it's just upper. We're going to take upper last name. And you know what? Let's test this real quick. What we're going to do is we're just going to say select upper last name from contact. And you'll notice that we get all the last names, but they're all uppercase. So if we want to make this case insensitive, we can say where the upper last name is like, and then we can put viz %. To see if it starts with that regardless of what case it is. So there you can see, even though it's, capital VIZ, because we promoted it all to uppercase, then we can run our comparisons against raw uppercase without having to worry about it. Now, let's say, because the instructions I actually say lowercase, and I'm not going to be this picky in grading, but if you want to get technical, we would do something like this. So instead of going to uppercase, we could go to lowercase and get the same results. Does that make sense to everybody, what we just did there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I say this a lot, if at any time you need to, something doesn't make sense, or I do something that you're like, whoa, hold up, just feel free to stop me. We can go over it. Because if you have that question, odds are there's someone else who does as well. So anyways, there's a good example for step 8. It's not all of step 8, mind you, but it's the base. All right, and then step 9 is we write this, and this is going to be, and I'll kind of give you a little hint here. So it says you're going to pull this like we had previously from the address table, but we want it where the city is in a list of Provo and San Jose. So we kind of did this with another one. But, if I was going to select everything from address where city in, and then we would put our little list here. And I would say Provo or, what was it, San Jose. And there we would get the list of cities in San Jose. So that's a good example of the in operator with the address table. So I'll let you guys kind of put together the rest. And then step 10, we kind of did with that between. And we talked a little bit about that one. And this one will let you choose. It has the dates here for you. So item release date between date 1 and date 2. And I'll show her real quick since we're talking about it. Let me just show you where that one was. Did I delete it? Apparently. So let's rewrite one. So like for step 10, we would do something like select everything from, and it was item, where release date is between, item release date, sorry. It's between, and we want it between, and I'm going to use the actual ones here, the 2nd of Jan, or whoops, guess I need to turn my num lock. I think I hit the num lock. Jan of, this says 03, and the 31st of December 03. So basically in the year of 2003. So that's kind of how you would do that between there. Up, and I am in insert mode. There we go. And then we would get all of our movies that are between there. And so then from there, you just have to, you know, piece together how to do the select statement and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, there's some good examples. That should be plenty to work on. But real quick, I kind of want to just show you one more thing, because where this is in the same year, right? So they want to say between January 3rd, the 1st of January and the 31st of December. We could do this in a little bit different way. We could say extract year from item release date is equal to 2003. So basically, instead of dates between, we're just going to get it where the year is 2003, and we get the same results either way. But, you know, for the sake of the lab, we'll use the between. So let me fix that real quick. So anyways, once you're done, you know, let's pretend that I did my lab. I'm done. You know, like I said, I would test each query as I write it in the terminal, just like we were doing, to get that immediate feedback. You know, I did it right in lab 2, so you can write it in lab 2, and then run it in your terminal, and then move on. When you're all done, you can save it, and then you can open up your terminal, and we will run apply Oracle lab2.sql. And it's going to run lab 1, and it's going to go, and we get all of our output. And then if the final step before you submit is, let's open up here, and my log file was that apply Oracle lab2.txt. And what I kind of like to do is I like to come right in here, and I hit Control F and search for error. And if it's red, that means there weren't any found, and that means that I'm usually good, because we want to look for error, because then if something didn't work for whatever reason, then we're good. So then once that's done, you can go ahead and submit it, and you're done with the lab.
Thank you.
Can you show how you search for error again real quick?
Yep. So when you're in there, you can, 2 ways. You can go up to edit and find, or you can just hit Control F, which is the shortcut, and then you can just search for the term you want. And then, you know, like, so it's one that's actually in there. If I search for select, it'll be green, and then I can cycle through all the occurrences of that string in the document. So I usually just go in here and look for error. You know, it's probably good practice just to kind of like look over your log, just to, you know, 12 rows selected, blah, blah, blah. You know, in this one where you're testing it all beforehand, not too much of a worry, but run error just to make sure, because that's pretty much what I look for. When I scroll through, I'm just going to compare your results, make sure they're good, but obviously an error is a pretty big one. So, you know, that's just, you know, make sure it's the right log file is the other part of that too, because sometimes we submit the wrong things, which is fine too. You know, if you submit the wrong thing, most of the time I know, like, a lot of people will accidentally submit, you know, like a different lab log file or something, and I can catch that, and I just say, hey, you know, you submit the wrong one. and then you can resubmit it. No problems. All right. Anyway, should be a nice, fun lab for you. I actually think I'm very excited because this is actually the first time that I've taught this lab, this new one. It's a new one, and so I'm very excited. So as you do it, let me know your feedback on Teams. Also, real quick, I just wanted to mention on Teams you can do direct messages. So if you want to reach me a little bit faster than you would like with Canvas, the little Canvas email feature or whatever it is they have, the inbox thing, you can shoot me a direct message on Teams. So, if you come across an issue with the lab or just if you liked it or whatever, just let me know so I can give that feedback. I'm pretty excited about it. And I think it'll actually be fun for you guys. It's pretty fun. And, feel free, do the lab, but feel free to play around as you go, try a couple different things, etc. So if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great week. And yeah, good luck. And I hope you get it done fast so you guys can go spend some time out there, hopefully in the sun, if it's sunny where you're at. So
I have a question, but it's nothing to do with the homework or the course, so you can end the recording unless someone has another question.
all right. Any other questions before we go here?